Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. What's the scariest thing you've ever seen, but no one will believe you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
When I was 8, I was swimming in Lake Ontario and came face to face with an eel. It was terrifying, and everyone called me a liar. Fast forward 20 years, and my then husband was working at a power plant on the lake and complaining about having to go into the room where all the fish get sucked in. I told him my eel story, and he said that they saw them all the time. It was such vindication. I was standing beside these two guys at the store who gave me the creeps so bad I called my husband and told him about them. He wasn't that interested in hearing about it. Turns out it was McLeod and Schmegleski after they'd killed a few people and before the cross-Canada manhunt kicked off. My family's got this cottage on a lake up in Canada. About 10 years ago or so, my brother and I spent all day playing Monopoly on the porch. It was getting late, the sun had gone down, and it was a new moon, so there was absolutely no light except our lantern and the stars. He got up to go pee, and I sat there and looked at the tree line over the lake. You could just make it out over the stars. In all of about 10 seconds, a perfectly spherical light that looked like it was about the size of that moon came out from behind the trees, across the lake, and went straight up into the sky before it got too small to see anymore. My brother came running out from wherever he was and asked if I saw it too. The next morning we were talking about it with the rest of the family. Nobody else had seen it, but our mom asked if we were just messing with everyone and pointed to a news article from the 60s that was framed on the back of the door talking about reports of the same thing. I was driving in a pretty rural part of Colorado that I didn't know on a late Sunday afternoon and was worried about running out of gas. Passed a couple of closed stations miles apart. Stopped at the next little station, even though it looked closed also, but I was desperate and tried the pumps, and they worked. I was standing next to the pump getting gas when, seemingly out of nowhere, there was a guy next to me asking if he could help me. Scared the shit out of me, but figured it was a full-service station, which was still a thing. I got back in my car, and when he finished, he came to my car window and said that the charge was some ridiculously low figure like $1.75. So I handed him a $5 bill and said, "Keep the change. Get out of here pretty quick." A few years ago, we were on vacation with our daughter, who was probably 2.5 at the time. She had a huge obsession with playing keepy-uppy. Thanks, Bluey. So we thought bringing a few balloons to blow up and play with would be a great way to pass the time in the evenings when it was too cold to go outside. We stayed at an Airbnb that had 2 bedrooms, one with a full bed and one with a queen. She was finally sleeping through the night without needing to breastfeed, so her dad insisted he sleep with her, and I get a quiet room to myself. No problem for me, I was excited. So I took the bedroom with the full so they could have more room to make for safe co-sleeping. Throughout our time there, I kept hearing things. I even told him that I was certain someone was living in the garage that was situated beneath the kitchen. Then, no, maybe it's the single-pane windows that are who knows how old. Finally, I joked that the house was haunted. He brushed me off, and I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right." One evening, we all ran around the house playing keepy-uppy. When it was time for bed, I remember specifically leaving 2 balloons in a room off of the kitchen so that they wouldn't bop around. Plus, there was no furnace vent in there. I don't know why that matters, but it did at the time. What matters is that the room I left the balloons in was at the back of the house, and the room I was sleeping in was in the front facing the street. At some point, I wake up because I hear the fainting bit of bouncing, rubbing of something. I was half asleep and unsure. It went on for maybe a minute until I realized the sound was at the foot of my bed. Then I was afraid that our daughter had crawled out of bed and was awake and playing by herself. So I popped my head up fast. When I looked to the foot of the bed, I saw what looked like a child's head duck down to hide. I felt like a horrible mother and called for my daughter, but there was no response. Worried, I went to look for her. She wasn't hiding at the end of the bed, and realistically, she wouldn't have been tall enough for me to see her anyway. She wasn't anywhere in the house, so I rushed to their room, and they were both there fast asleep. The next morning, as we were getting ready to leave for breakfast, as I was walking out of the bathroom to grab my shoes, scanning for the area of the floor that I remembered leaving them, there was a yellow balloon under my bed. I guess I had witnesses for this one, but it happened so recently and I haven't shared it anywhere. Recently, I had the honor of serving as a bridesmaid at a wedding in a remote area of Texas. The evening prior to the wedding, we chose to gather with the groomsmen at their Airbnb, which was approximately 30 minutes away, for some refreshments. The night before the wedding, we decided to meet up with the groomsmen at their Airbnb. I was the DD for myself, the bride, and 2 other bridesmaids. We were told to be extremely careful on the back roads, that the area was heavy with deer and other animals. Luckily, no one else was out at that time, and I was driving a rental, so I took a 60-mile-per-hour road, going about 35-ish. On our way back, I rounded a corner, and my headlights shone on a very small cemetery. As soon as the lights illuminated, we all saw something on 2 legs, sprinting ungodly fast at the back. The girls in the car immediately started saying Hail Marys, and we were very uncomfortable for the rest of the ride home. I truly can't explain what it looked like, but it was the most unnatural thing I've ever seen. I grew up in a tiny town, population 400. My parents never cared about what I was up to as long as I wasn't bothering them, so I never had a curfew or anything like that. So I was about 14, walking around town after midnight, texting friends and listening to music, just enjoying a quiet summer night. I was sitting on a kind of stage, like a big concrete block in the park with a roof, mostly used for a yearly 4-H fair. I was completely in the dark, but I could see all the streets around me in the park, thanks to the streetlights. I must have heard a noise or something, because I randomly looked up, and standing in the streetlight was a man wearing a long red dress and no shoes, looking at me. He was old, bald, beer-bellied, and completely unfamiliar, which is just wrong. There were only 400 people in my town, and I'd lived there for 14 years. I knew everybody. Everything about this guy, his weird clothes, the hour of night, the stillness watching me, still feel cold just thinking about it. We just stared at each other for what felt like a few minutes. Eventually, he just sort of wandered off out of the streetlight, and I couldn't see him anymore. I sprinted the short distance back home and sat in my room, glued to the window in the dark, waiting to see if he'd wander past, or worse, follow me home. I never saw the man again, and my dad didn't believe it at all. He said I must have fallen asleep or seen an animal. No, it was a large bald man in a red spaghetti-strap dress with an asymmetrical hem and slouch neckline standing at the corner of 2nd and Ash. I know what I saw.
I mean, it seems like a pretty wild thing for you to just make up in a town that small, so I tend to believe you as well. And as far as me coming up with an answer, I'll have to think about it. A lot of options in my brain.
Not answering the exact prompt, but I don't think I've ever shared this with anyone, probably because I didn't think anyone would believe me. My older sister died in a car accident when I was 14. She was 16 and I fell asleep behind the wheel. My mom was obviously sort of righteously psycho about me driving late when I got my license a couple of years later, but also very fair about it, looking back. I had a boyfriend I'd been seeing since just before I got my license, and he lived about 25 minutes away. We attended the same school district, but he lived out in the country. I had to have been at least 17 by then, because my curfew was midnight, and we'd been together for a while. One night I fell asleep in his room and woke up well after 2 a.m. My mom hadn't called his parents yet, so I was guessing she'd fallen asleep, and I hauled ass out of the house and started home. But I was tired, and had probably been asleep for 3 to 4 hours at this point. We were generally good kids. It was one of those drives where you knew the area so well you could do it with your eyes closed, I think. I started to nod off while I hauled ass home, and I remember looking over and seeing a giant black dog with a docked tail about to run out in front of my car. I hit the brakes, alert instantly, no dog. I'd driven past that house hundreds of times, but never remembered a dog there. No dog. I drove home lowly and carefully and scared. My mom was asleep, but our family dog was waiting at the door, a Rottweiler. That was a birthday gift to my older sister that she had picked out, the runt of the litter, years before. A big black dog with a dog tail. I was driving to my in-laws 2 days before the new year, and while on the highway I saw a giant multicolored morphing craft. We only saw it for about 5 seconds before it vanished into the mountains. I actually made a post about it on Reddit right after I witnessed it. Please go look. 2 other people in the car with me had also seen it. Everyone sort of just brushes it off when I tell the story, but it was the craziest thing I'd ever witnessed in my entire life. I was at a local cemetery in New Zealand, and while walking out, I saw one of those little white crosses they use as a placeholder before they get a headstone. The bit that goes horizontal with the name on it had fallen off. I picked it up, put it back on the cross, and left. That night I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a man sitting at the end of my bed. I can still vividly recall it. Blue shirt, jeans, shaggy, brunette hair, and throat mangled as shit. He absolutely terrified me, and I screamed my head off and told him to go away. He blinked and he was gone. Now, I always wash my hands when leaving a cemetery, and don't touch shit in there unless it belongs to the person I'm visiting. Edit to add, someone messaged asking about the hand washing thing. At any Urupa cemetery you find in Aotearoa, New Zealand, there will be a bunch of water bottles at the gate. You're meant to wash your hands or rinse them when you leave the site. I think it's to prevent anything following you, etc. It is a practice of Maori culture here, and I may be a white girl, but we've got Maori wahanu on Dad's side, and I grew up in an area that was predominantly Maori Pacifica. I've learned never to question what the aunties tell you to do, even if you think it's a bunch of hippy-dippy stuff, until you do the above and get the fright out of your life. LMAFO. Sorry. Wah. When I was around 7 years old, I was sleeping and something woke me up. I slept in my own room, and there was a table under my bedroom window. I looked toward the window, which was a sliding window, and it was wide open, and I saw a chubby guy squatting on the table outside looking like he was trying to remove the fly screen. For some reason, I couldn't scream, like when you try to scream in a dream and nothing comes out. I went to my parents' room and woke them up, and they told me I must have had a nightmare and to go back to bed. When I went back into my room, there was no one at the window, but I put my hand through the window and the fly screen was gone. I went back to sleep, and in the morning the fly screen was back out the window, and there was a slice in it as though it was done with a knife. Parents called police and fingerprints were taken, but nothing ever came of it, and they were still trying to convince me it was just a nightmare. I wouldn't sleep with the windows open after that, and even 38 years later, I'm convinced I wasn't dreaming. I was driving home late at night around 1 a.m. in the summer of 2012. This is relevant because there was the whole, oh, the sun is going to blow up and the world is going to end prophecy, or whatever at the time. I was in high school and actually pretty anxious about it, even though I knew it likely wouldn't happen. Well, I'm driving, and it's the darkest it gets at night, and all of a sudden the sky starts getting brighter and brighter until it looks like the middle of the day within seconds. Light, bright blue sky. But more than that, the temperature inside of my car got hotter. I specifically remember this because I thought to myself, the sun must be exploding. I'm about to die alone in my car. The next thing that happens is I saw a meteor fly above my car, not too far above me, and then fizzle out in a red spark, and the sky went dark again. And my car cooled down almost instantly. When I tell people about the meteor, they believe me, but never that the inside of my car got hot. I know what I felt, so I don't doubt myself, but everyone I tell is skeptical. My dad was a forest firefighter in Victoria, Australia. He was cutting a fire break during a bushfire when a black panther ran out of the scrub and stopped right in front of him, then crossed the cleared area and disappeared into the bush behind him. People roll their eyes when he tells the story, but I've been hearing him tell it for 30 years, and the details never change. Plus, I've never known him to make stuff up. He's an experienced bushman who would have a feral cat if he saw it. I have no reason not to believe him. I was walking across a long 5-minute distance gravel pitch at about 2 a.m. after work, completely dark and empty. Only the streetlights way ahead or behind me for a light, but really just landmarks for which direction to head in. All of a sudden, the entire night sky lit up so brightly and swelled in a bluish tint for about 4 seconds. I began to tear up in panic and just started running toward the streetlights ahead so I could get home ASAP. The phone had died, so I got back, plugged it in, and started searching all the social media sites to see if anyone else had seen it. It's a small town in Northern Ireland, and it was a weekday, middle of the night. Never found an explanation or anyone else that saw it. It's the most scared I think I've ever been. Sprinting home in the dark after the light went away, and only being able to hear my own panicked panting as I got closer to the streetlights gives me anxiety now. Ugh. Ball lightning. While I was camping, a severe storm approached, prompting us to abandon our tents and seek shelter in our cars. Very close storm. I was one of the last getting out of my tent and saw something I can only describe as an electric blue ball-shaped item floating through the sky, maybe 10 feet max off the ground, behind our line of tents. The incident was in the early 90s, so it wasn't until I looked it up years later that I actually found a name for what I saw. At the time, it was considered largely hypothetical. When my best friend and I were kids, we used a mountain bike in the forest in southwest Europe. It was a beautiful place full of trees and lakes. It was a great place to hang out and explore when it was hot, as it was cooler. It was very remote at times. You could go off the beaten track and find abandoned farms from the time of dictatorships that were filled with incredible pieces of history. One night we got a little lost and it started getting dark. We were at a particularly bushy, wooded intersection when, ominously, we heard a growl like no other. It was like the distant drone of a motorcycle engine. It was coming from an alcove in the bushes, where we could see 2 eyes, glazed and glaring back at us. Our first thoughts were that it was a dog guarding its territory. We were happy to outrun dogs on our bikes during the day, but this time it was darker, and we were not entirely sure of our way back to civilization. But then it rose and slumped out of the bush. At the same time, its height greater than any domestic dog we'd ever seen. Its back fur stuck out in spiked, matted clumps, its teeth bare and long. We were staring at an animal said to have been extinct from that region, a wolf. It was so huge, its growling so different from a dog. Somehow, we just got on our bikes and rode away without incident, and eventually made our way back to a local village where we found a bar and tried to tell a couple of adults we knew at the time. Naturally, no one believed us, but we know what we saw. One day when I was maybe in 4th grade, I stayed home alone sick, and I saw a man in what looked like an old-timey gold deep-sea diver suit walking next to my house in the backyard towards where I was standing at the kitchen window. He had the circular helmet with the plastic or glass or who even knows, clear piece over the face that looked like it opened, but I couldn't see a face or anything inside it from where I was standing. I don't remember what happened next, but for years I told myself that it was just a meter reader, and maybe something crazy was going on that day when we had to wear a full diver astronaut suit, and that was good enough for me. But when I interrogate that idea, it doesn't make a single bit of sense, so I don't know, man. Weird stuff. There was a haunting presence in my first apartment. I lacked the financial means to relocate, so it was a situation where I had to manage as best as I could. I have lots of stories, but this was the worst, with proof that no one believed. I used to have a bed frame. Since this incident, I've been unable to use it without feeling uneasy. It's approximately 3 a.m., as that's what the most significant event typically occur. Something crawls out from under my bed, pulls itself onto my mattress and grabs my arm. It started pulling me to the edge of the bed. My cat ran over, batted it, and it let me go. She chased it under the bed while I scrambled for the light. I had a handprint bruise on my arm for weeks after. The handprint with its long fingers was unsettling to look at. No one believed me. I didn't want to risk a psych visit by going to a hospital, so I asked a school nurse, I'm a teacher, who had an RN license, about the bruise. She told me that it could be caused by mold. I gave up talking about it. I also stopped using storage under my bed. My mattress or box spring is on the floor. My brave girl died of cancer last year at the age of 11. I've got a couple, but whatever you want to call it, skinwalker, shapeshifter, something along those lines sticks out the most. I was out on my cousin's porch at night smoking a cigarette and saw this lady sitting on the bench in the front yard. I noticed that she was crying, so being the dumbass I am, I went to ask what was wrong and if I could help. She's not talking, but I end up sitting down trying to console her after asking if it's alright, and something just didn't sit right inside me. She started calming down, but was unintelligible for most part. I was able to catch something about a party, and that was it. The issue arose because we were in the country, and the night was exceptionally quiet. As she's trying to talk to me, I noticed that her eyes have extra pupils. She had oval-shaped pupils surrounding the main pupil, and they were a vibrant gold color, not gold color. I couldn't take my eyes off of them, and was confused when she asked if she could come inside. I snapped out of it because it wasn't my house, it wasn't my say-so, but being the dumbass I am, I went to the door and was about to ask my cousin if it was alright, running it through my brain because something was not sitting right at all. I went back, and as I'm walking and saying I can't give her a night's stay because it's not my place, she runs off and is fast. As she's running, I swear her limbs grew longer. She shifted into a weird creature and turned into the woods off the road. The same cousin and others saw something with me with glowing eyes change shape in the same area the creature ran into years before. Whatever it wasn't human. My parents sent me home when I was 6 years old. They sent me home on foot from a small town. I heard my mother call my name. She sounded worried. I turned around to look and saw nothing. Then I started to walk again, and I heard my mother's voice calling me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw an angel filled with light floating in the air, repeating my name. I was a bit scared by this and started to walk again, slipping in front of the hotel in town. I fell face first and I cut open my lip. I ran back to my parents' restaurant. My mother was freaking out, and I asked why she was calling me. She said I didn't. She thought I had a concussion. She took me to the doctor in a nearby town where I had to undergo stitches. My mother was so angry at the hotel. At 17, I had the same thing happen. I was on my bike. I heard my name. It sounded like my mother. Once more, the sound of my name resonated with urgency. I looked around and I hit a rock with my tire and went over the bike in the front. The next time I heard this, I was 21 years old and a single mother. I was going downstairs to do some laundry. I heard my mom's voice yelling at me. I looked around trying to see. I took a step and fell onto an empty 2-liter bottle, which I could not see in the darkness. I fell all the way down the stairs. Thereafter, I got upset. Every time I heard this voice, I got really hurt. I guess the voice wanted me to stop in my tracks, but it was so like my mother that I would look around thinking she was there. I uttered the words, "I will never listen to this voice again. You're hurting me." I never heard the voice again. I wonder sometimes still if I shut off some guardian angel or maybe a part of me that could sense future danger right around the corner.
Okay, so during the pandemic, my family moved from Georgia to Oregon by way of an RV. One of my favorite things was sitting outside and reading alone in a different state every night. For the most part, we were in KOA-type places that weren't full but weren't empty, so in general, I didn't see many people. This particular night, we were west of Albuquerque and still in New Mexico. We were at a private campground,
that was fairly empty and a good distance away from 40. Just a small 2-lane road in the desert. At night, with no moon, it was pretty dark. So, I was out reading, minding my own business, when I heard a car coming from a good way away on the road. I look up at it and see the headlights, and something grabs my attention. About 50 feet away from me, to the left, is a long but low chicken wire fence that separates the RV park from ranch land. As I look over at this car coming, I'm looking across the ranch toward the road, and I notice something running on 4 legs. Probably a coyote, I think. Cool. While I'm watching it, and as it gets closer, running parallel to the fence, it suddenly stands up. It's supported by 2 legs. It runs on 2 legs without losing speed. Just ran off into the night. After a second, after I started breathing again, I figured it was something I wasn't supposed to see. Went back in the RV, made sure everything was locked, and tried to sleep. My daughter was born in the NICU, so for the first few weeks of her life, I stayed in a hotel very close by for families of sick children. I woke up one night and heard the craziest, loudest noises coming from the window. Thinking about it right now is making my eyes water. I don't know, I went outside, and it was probably 10:30 to 11 p.m. in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. This noise was loud. It echoed across the valley and lasted minutes. I woke up my daughter's mom and had her listen. She wouldn't stay awake to hear the noise, and then it stopped. I checked the news and scrolled through social media, seeking any explanation for the noise. I found nothing. My daughter's mom said she didn't hear anything and didn't remember me waking her up. I asked the staff at the hotel. No one heard it. I felt so crazy that I know it was real. I've never heard that sound again. I have a lot, but the one that pops into my mind first is what happened when I was a child. I never slept facing the closet. I was just a precocious child and thought that if I couldn't see something, it wasn't there. Now, keep in mind that I wasn't a big dreamer, never had sleep paralysis, and woke at dawn almost every morning once I was up. I fell asleep that night facing away from the closet, but when I woke up I was facing it. Immediately I was awake, my eyes wide open, and I had no residual sleepiness. The door was cracked open. I never found it cracked open. I always checked. This particular night I was utterly terrified. I held my breath and waited. Now this is where you would think nothing will happen, which is what I thought. Wrong. In all its childlike horror, the door slammed open and hit the wall, and from within the closet came this giant 7-foot creature that wasn't a skeleton, but looked like it had formed out of layers and layers of bone. It was tall, with a giant mouth and black pits for eyes, and it was as pale as bone. It charged at me, and I covered my head with a blanket. I felt it hit the bed, and I stayed under the covers until I finally had the spine to look. It was gone. But the bed was uneven with the wall because the creature hitting it had moved the bed. I got up and screamed like a banshee for my mom, and for the next 5 years, I slept in a tent. I was 13, staying at my grandma's house one summer. It was the middle of the day, maybe 2 p.m. or so, broad daylight. I walked from the living room to the dining room and felt a strange compulsion to look to my left, down the hallway that led to a storage room. There, Standing in the doorway to the storage room, I saw a shadowy figure. The figure did not resemble a person. At first I described it as Gollum from Lord of the Rings, but super tall, hunching over to fit its height under the ceiling, standing with bent, crouched knees and perched hands. Gray skin stretched over a bony figure with long, scraggly, straw-like hair, a gaping mouth, and sunken holes where eyes should be. Within the past year, I retold this story. I'm 24 now, and a friend told me it sounds like the Rake creepypasta. I looked up images, and the resemblance in some illustrations is striking, though not exact. The thing I saw wasn't bold, for one. I just froze. In an instant, it vanished, swiftly making its way into the storage room. I texted all of my friends about it, and they thought it was insane, lol. I was stone cold sober. I've never hallucinated, and this is the only time I've ever seen something like this in my life. For the sake of transparency, I do believe in ghosts, and there has always been a terrible energy to my grandma's house. Things move, lights turn on and off on their own, the mirrors don't feel right, and my youngest sibling has reported multiple sightings of weird shit over the years. So, I don't know. It was scary. I never went to see anything like it again.